Asia, I'm Christine Tan. Today we meet a family whose history spans back to the 1850s, where shipping barons were king of the seas. Today the business continues to thrive. We meet the sixth generation, Timothy Cosulich. We catch up with Timothy Cosulich on board one of his marine fuel barges off the shores of Singapore. This is a man with a huge responsibility on his shoulders. He's the sixth generation steering the ship for the family's 158-year-old business. Cosulich says he was never forced into that position.
In our family, there's absolutely no pressure to join the business. It's always kind of the easy option to choose. You have your family business there, and why not? Why don't I join? But at the same time, for us, it's quite the opposite. We want to make sure that there is a clear reason why we join the business. We have to make our own contribution and improve the company with our skills.
Before Cosulich joined the company, he was made to understand the harsh realities of shipping.
My father always told me, if you want to join the company, you have to be very passionate, because you're never going to be a multi-billionaire here.
He said that to you? He was that frank?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he said if money is your main driver, definitely look for another job, because you're going to make a lot more money somewhere else. Definitely not here. If you join the family business, it must be because you're passionate about the business, because you want to make a difference, and because you want to leave a legacy behind you, but not for money.
Fratelli Cosulich began as a ship owner in 1857 from its hometown in Genoa, Italy. It managed to sail far and wide thanks to its ability to embrace change. Over the years, the business diversified into freight forwarding, marine fuel trading, ship management, and yacht services.
It's a very old company, because ultimately, being a family business, it's not only about profits, it's not only about results, but it's really about reputation and the image and the legacy, as I said, that you leave behind. So that was really, I think, part of the success.
But the group itself has been profitable over the last 158 years.
Very, very profitable, and we built a very large equity without taking on any debt. So as a group, we basically have no debt, because again, we've been very conservative. But being 100% family owned, we have the privilege of not having to answer to anyone about our decisions. So we can afford to stick to a certain plan, even if we don't see the results in the short term, because we believe it's a good project in the long term.
The lean and fit CEO who takes part in triathlons is driven to push the family business further.
You continue to set the bar a little higher, so you set a certain objective for yourself, and I see that very often with my sport careers. Let's say with triathlon, you set an objective for yourself, then you achieve it, and then suddenly that objective is not relevant
Do you
anymore.
always have to win?
Yes, I mean that's it's not that I have to win, but that's always the objective. Then if someone is faster than you, then well done to them, and you shake their hand and you train a bit harder to beat them next time. But I think the objective should always be to win.
But in this part of the world, competition is intense. The water is turbulent. Cosulich also had to clean up the operations in Singapore from stem to stern. You spent the last 5 years turning around the group's Singapore unit.
Yeah.
What went wrong?
I think we were a bit naive when we entered the Singapore marine fuel business. We just assumed that having a long experience in other locations in the same industry would basically allow us to be successful over here as well. And as a company, as a group, one of our very strong beliefs is that we want to empower people and give them responsibilities and motivate them with this independence and the possibility of almost being entrepreneurs themselves. Of course, having such a policy exposes you as a company to certain risks.
What kind of risks?
Well, people taking advantage of you, and
were funds mismanaged?
Well, for sure, the company was not properly managed. Whether there were funds mismanaged or not, it's difficult to say, because it's not so easy to dig back into those numbers. However, the performance today certainly is due to the good performance of my team here and the support of the group. But at the same time, I think it's evidence that the company was not well managed before here in Singapore.
Did you lose a lot of money in the process?
We did. It was an expensive lesson, but I think we learned a lesson. And as we were saying earlier, everything I didn't learn at INSEAD, I learned it here during the 5 years it took me to turn around the company.
And what were some of the valuable lessons learned in the process?
I think one is to continue trusting people, but to check. So the famous trust and check, and that's something that for me has been very important. The other thing is really being physically present here. The presence of the owner of the company really makes a difference. When you have the owner present, going to the office every day and showing everyone with his own behavior how our staff is expected to behave.
Till now, Fratelli Cosulich has remained fiercely independent, operating 6 offices in Italy and 10 offices abroad, hauling up more than $2 billion in annual revenue. Since you took over the Singapore office, volume for your bunker fuel business has grown 6 times. Yes. You now ship about 150,000 tons per month. Yeah. How exactly do you operate in such a fiercely competitive market like Singapore? Are you making enough money to break even?
We're just making enough money to break even, and I don't expect this to change significantly for the next year.
Why has it been so tough?
It's a very competitive market. Consider there's about 60 suppliers at the moment in Singapore, and the market is big, but it's definitely not big enough for 60 suppliers. So it's a very competitive market, and unfortunately, there are a few suppliers who don't particularly care about their reputation, so they can afford not to be very reliable and not to offer a particularly good service. But of course, on the other hand, they are very aggressive on pricing, so they can be very cheap. And that is seriously damaging the market. It's damaging the reputation of Singapore in the bunker industry. And our way to compete is still to focus on those customers who appreciate good customer service, reliable service, and of course to leverage on our reputation that we've built over so many years.
To make things more challenging, Singapore is now imposing a new ruling where you now have to put in place mass flow meters, or MFM, yeah, which is a device which you actually measure quantity of fuel when you transfer from ship to ship.
Correct.
You welcome the move?
Of course, actually we were amongst those companies, those few companies who were pushing for an early implementation of this mass flow meter. The mass flow meter is a device, as you say, that will hopefully accurately measure the quantity of fuel that is supplied to customers.
And was it less transparent before?
Yes, at the moment actually still less transparent, and the MPA, the Marine Port Authority, Maritime Port Authority in Singapore is pushing really hard for this implementation of the flow meter. The deadline is now set at January 2017, and definitely the expectation is that the market will improve.
So what impact is this likely to have on the overall bunkering market?
Well, I believe finally the market will be a bit more regulated. I think those second-tier players hopefully will leave the market.
How many players ideally would you like to see exit the market?
I think out of the 60 that we have now, I believe 40 is a good number. It would make the Singapore market still very competitive, but I think it would definitely create a more level playing field.
So with less players, could this significantly improve your margins then?
It's not only the number of players, it's also the type of players. I'm very happy to compete with reliable players who play by the rules, and players who basically focus on quality as well. What I don't particularly like is competing with players who try to find shortcuts. So I definitely think that the margins will improve.
By how much?
Well, maybe 10–20%, but that's good enough for us. We like steady businesses. We don't necessarily look for a huge improvement. For us, it's good to grow steadily year after year.
You're in charge of the marine fuel business here in Asia, which means you sell directly to ship owners.
Yes.
And at the same time, you keep physical inventory.
Yeah.
How challenging, how uncertain is that when oil prices are so volatile? What are some of the risks involved?
Well, the obvious risk is that you buy some fuel today, and tomorrow the value of that fuel has decreased by 20%.
How do you manage that risk?
Well, part of it is by hedging, and part of it is also by managing your inventory in the most efficient way. So trying to minimize your inventory and trying to turn around your inventory as quickly as possible.
Have you lost any money in the process in the last couple of months?
Well, last couple of months, not so much. There was a big dip, particularly in the second half of last year. And
you were caught off guard.
Yeah, at that time we lost a little bit, but not much. I mean, if I compare our company and our results to other players in the industry, I think we were definitely fine.
When you look at the supply out there and the comments coming out from OPEC, where do you see oil prices heading?
I think oil price will see a correction, a slight correction upwards, not a major one. I still think that oil price will be around the $60 mark, between $50 and $60 mark in the medium to long term. I don't expect them to go lower. Of course, there are some big uncertainties, and one is, for example, the impact of the Iranian sanctions. They will be lifted, that we know. When exactly the lifting of the sanctions will be implemented is a bit more uncertain. And what is definitely uncertain is what the impact of that decision will be on oil price, because suddenly there will be a lot of quantity and fuel coming online.
And when that happens, where do you see oil prices?
Well, again, it really depends on what OPEC countries decide to do, because if at the moment they're really trying to wait, and nobody wants to be the first mover.
Do you think they'll finally have to make the move?
I think they will. I think they will, because at some point I think they will have to sit down and say, okay, now we probably have to cut production in order to sustain a certain level of price.
Looking ahead, when you look at the marine fuel business here in Asia, where is the future? Does it involve LPG and LNG operations eventually?
I think eventually yes. What eventually means, that I'm not sure, to be honest. I think LNG will become a real alternative probably in 5 to 10 years, but it's at the moment it's still up to the big players such as Shell and BP and the oil majors to really look at the upstream part, and then once the upstream part is set, then of course you have service companies that can come in and support those projects. So from our side, we will be very happy, for example, to invest in some LNG barges, but of course there has to be a supply network around the world, because at the moment the only places in the world where LNG is working as a fuel is in the Northern Sea, for example, for short trips. So there's still quite a bit of uncertainty on that.
Stay with us. More with Timothy Cosulich of the well-known Cosulich shipping family in just a moment.
The growth now will come from the neighboring countries in Asia, and particularly Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia and the Philippines.
So Southeast Asia.
Yeah, Southeast Asia, definitely.
Managing Asia. We'll be right back. Italy's Cosulich family has sailed the high seas for over a century. Now the sixth generation is continuing the legacy here in Asia in marine fuel. You've been sent here to grow Asia. You've made Singapore your hub. Where do you see growth in this part of the world?
Well, Singapore will continue to be the hub for us in Southeast Asia. We've been in Singapore for about 20 years now. I believe the growth now will come from the neighboring countries in Asia, and particularly Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia and the Philippines. These are probably our focus points for the region.
So Southeast Asia?
Yeah, Southeast Asia, definitely. And this is why I'm based here. This is why I see myself being based here in the long term.
Cosulich is now steering the company into uncharted territory in Asia, yacht services.
Well, there was also a kind of a learning curve for me, because I've been focusing on marine fuel for a few years, and then suddenly we took over the management of yacht services at 1 Degree 15, the marina in Sentosa here in Singapore, and of course I wasn't particularly experienced about that type of business, so I really had to rely on the know-how that we had inside our group, because we already manage marinas in the south of France, in Italy, in the yachting industry in general. You deal with yacht owners, and of course the type of customer relationship that you have is completely different. Of course, the margins are also different, and sometimes you get some very unreasonable requests, but you still have to fulfill those requests because that's what your
So
your
apart from
business is.
Singapore, which other countries are you targeting when it comes to yacht management services?
Well, Thailand is definitely one of the main ones. Phuket is also a hub in terms of yachting. There's a couple of very good marinas, and it's a very fast-growing business in Asia because over the last 10-20 years there wasn't really a yacht culture in Asia, and that's starting to grow, and it's very interesting to see how people in Asia, they start to appreciate the value of a yacht, and so there's definitely more opportunities in Indonesia, for example, in Malaysia. It's definitely a very interesting and fast-growing market.
Let's talk about Hong Kong and China, because you mentioned your family has a long-established history.
Yeah.
There you have a freight forwarding business, you're a fuel operator there,
Yeah.
you also have a ship agency business there. Are you worried about the slowdown you're seeing from China?
The slowdown in China is basically equivalent to what would be an incredible growth rate in anywhere else in the world. So it's still a growing country, and we've had very close relationships with government-owned companies, particularly with Costco, and we managed to establish with them a relationship based on trust, and so far we were never disappointed. So I also maintain this trust that the Chinese government will continue to do what's right for the country, which doesn't mean that everything is fine, but I am still optimistic on China.
Are you looking closely at the possible merger of Costco and China Shipping Container Lines and what that could mean in terms of changing the dynamics of the relationship you have with Costco?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think I don't think that the possible merger would change the relationship we have with Costco. It's for sure the shipping industry is a shipping that has been consolidating a lot, and over the last few years, and it continues to consolidate. So volumes are definitely a key factor, a key success factor for any company operating in this industry. So it doesn't surprise me that Chinese companies they want to get a bit more critical mass, and that will definitely allow them to be more competitive with companies such as Maersk and MSC. So their move doesn't surprise me, and I'm not particularly concerned about this particular merger.
Right now, China, I understand, makes up about 20% of the entire group's total turnover, $2 billion. How fast do you see the Chinese market growing for you?
At the moment, it's growing quite fast, actually. Surprisingly, even in Italy, as you know, Italy has not had a booming economy lately. But despite that, we've been growing quite significantly, and we, both in terms of number of people, in terms of volumes, in terms of revenues, and so from our perspective, actually, we continue to see growth. And
could it easily reach 30-40% of total turnover?
I think it depends on also on the other business units, because other business units are also growing. So we actually like that there is a bit of competition between business units on the growth, because China is for us a particularly important market on the agency business and on the freight forwarding business, not so much on the marine fuel business. So of course I'm also pushing, since it's my business unit, for our business unit to grow in China as well. So we'll see what the dynamic will be.
Stay with us. Up next.
Of course, when your size reaches 2 billions, like in our case, then of course you have some extra problems. But in general,
what extra problems? Managing Asia. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Managing Asia. Today we've been talking to the well-known Cosulich family, Timothy Cosulich, who's been tasked to grow the family business here in Asia. Fratelli Cosulich is close to 160 years old. The group is run by a board of directors, which makes up of family members, including yourself. As a family business, what are some of the complexities involved running a global $2 billion company?
Well, I think the complexities that a family business has are very similar regardless of size. Then of course, when your size reaches 2 billions, like in our case, then of course you have some extra problems. But in general,
what extra problems?
Well, coordination, of course, and this global reach means that you have to have an eye on different parts of your business, and you cannot be physically everywhere at the same time. But I would say that some of the most typical issues that we face as a family business are in terms of succession. Obviously, you want to make sure that there is a succession plan, that the company is managed by people who have the right set of skills. At the same time, you want to have a certain level of meritocracy in the business, because it would be very unmotivating for our directors, our professional managers, to see that a young family member with absolutely no experience or no skills comes in and suddenly he's the boss. So it's important to reward the loyalty and the skills of the people who have been with us for a long time. So I believe that from that point of view, we are doing quite well. It doesn't mean that we are perfect, because the fact that out of the 7 board members, 7 are from the family, it implies that we do lack some meritocracy, and we do have some improvements.
The family itself has set up a trust, and as I understand it, all shares of the family business are in this trust. Tell me more about this ownership structure and how it makes the family business more sustainable.
Well, basically, what it means is that the shares are not in our private wealth anymore. The shares are owned by a trust, and the trust, as you know, is an independent entity.
So no one can actually sell his or her own share?
Well, correct, yes. So it's a decision that only the trustees can make, and the trustees are basically the family members involved in the business. But the intention is definitely not to sell the business, and also consider that back in the days, one of the perception basically was, or one of the ideas was, that the shares had no value, because you would receive the shares for free from your father, and you would then actually not sell, you would give the shares for free to your children. And during the course of your employment with the company, you would not receive dividends, because the company in 160 years or 158 years has never declared dividends or distributed dividends, for that matter. So for us, it was really something tangible, that the shares had no value, because since you don't pay for them, since you don't get any money from them, and since you don't receive dividends, then they really have no value. But of course, this is not such a straightforward concept, and particularly nowadays, it's difficult with succession, and how to manage, and how not to affect the company's financial position. So this is why we decided to basically put all the shares into a trust, so that there's no issues in terms of
So
succession.
you don't own the shares are given to you freely. Where is the incentive there? How do you get rewarded? I mean, if there's no dividends declared, where is the incentive?
Well, the incentive is definitely the responsibilities and the entrepreneurial spirit that you must already have before you join the company. Then obviously we all get a salary, and we all get a bonus at the end of the year if the results are positive. But again, the motivation to join the family business and to work for the family business is not a financial motivation. It's really more about the challenge, and being able to grow and improve something that has been given to you already in very good shape, and then try to make it better.
You're 35 years old, you're Italian. Spent the last 6 years here in Asia, 1 year in Hong Kong, last 5 years turning around the Singapore unit. Recently got married, won the Ironman in Malaysia last year. How would you describe your leadership and your management style?
I'm quite open, and so I'm very accessible, and the way I like to lead is really by example. I think it's very easy to just say, well, this is how we should do things, and this is what you have to do, and this is how your behavior should be. But then it's much more powerful to actually show it yourself, and with your actions, with your behavior on a daily basis. So this is how I like to lead. I also like to have a balanced life. I work very hard, but at the same time I have my hobbies, and I have my life, and I want my people to do the same.
And finally, as the 6th generation, what important lessons did you learn from your father, and what impact do you want to make?
I learned a lot from my father, and he's always been a role model for me, and the hard-working spirit that he has, and also this diverse set of interests that he has. He loves art, he loves running, and that's probably where I took my sport passion from, and he loves his job, and that's something that's always inspired me, and the way he goes to the office every day. He travels probably 60% of his time, and he talks about business all the time, and so for me it was definitely an example to follow. For me, success will definitely be being able not only to follow my father's footsteps, but also to improve the incredible work that both him and my grandfather and everyone before them already did.
And that was Timothy Cosulich, CEO of Fratelli Cosulich, based here in Singapore. Hope you've enjoyed the program. Join us again next week for more leadership insights here on Managing Asia. I'm Christine Tan. Thanks for watching.